Hi book lovers, it's Jenny at Julia Baby Jen's Reading Room, and this is my weekly wrap up for October 8th. Okay, so my wrap up's a little late. Normally I do this on Thursday, and last week things were kind of crazy and I was in the middle of several different books, so I kind of decided I would wait through the weekend and do it today on Tuesday, and I might change my weekly wrap up to Tuesdays now just based off of that because I won't be ready to do one this Thursday. So this is almost 2 weeks worth of weekly wrap up. And since the last one I have read 7 books and 3 novellas or shorts. So we got a lot to talk about, so let's get going. All Our Yesterdays by Kristen Terrell. This is a great time travel book. I already talked a little bit about it in my September wrap up, but this is just an amazing read. 5-star read for me. Loved it. It's very deep, very gripping, very suspenseful. I had no idea what was going to happen, but you knew something bad was going to happen. It just was set up that way, that it was not going to be really a happy ending, but you were hoping for the best. Basically, it's about Em and Finn, who are in the future. There's been a time machine that's been created, and the government has control over it, and bad things have happened, and we're in the apocalypse, basically, proportion type of things, and the government has gotten way too controlling. So, Em and Finn know personally the doctor is who they call him, and he's the guy who invented the time machine, and he's kind of in charge of them, and he's torturing them because she has some kind of documents that he needs. They basically escape and go back in time to try to kill the doctor so none of this takes place. So it's really, really, really good, really gripping, and I really loved it. Dark Frost by Jennifer Estep. I gave this book 4 stars. This is the 3rd book in the Mythos Academy, and I really like this series. It's really fun and addicting, and I like the whole mythological element to it, and then it's at a school, and it's constant adventure, and Gwen is constantly in danger. And then she's having major love life issues and best friend issues, and it's just a really fun series. I really enjoyed it, and you learn more and more with each book. So this is another great installment, and I really enjoyed it. The Giver by Lowry. I read this for Banned Books Week last week, at the end of the week. I'd kind of forgotten that it was Banned Books Week, and I realized, oh, I need to read a Banned Books book. Actually, there were several that I wanted to reread, but I didn't get to them, but I will probably reread them anyway at some point. Banned book reading doesn't need to happen just once a year, but yes, you should I always try to read at least 1 book. So I picked this one up because it's fairly short, and I really wanted to read it. And I've heard great things about it, and I really liked it. I gave it a 4-star. It wasn't really a 5-star for me, although I did see the genius in it, and this one's going to be really hard for me to talk about because my brain is still trying to muddle through this book, and it's been several days since I've read it, and I've been thinking about it constantly since. So I'm between a 4 and a 4.5 star on this, actually. I don't think it's quite a 5-star just because of the ending. I wasn't thrilled with the ending, although I understand why it ended the way it did and why the author did that, but I still wasn't thrilled with it. And normally that kind of thing doesn't bother me, but for some reason this book it did. So, but up until then, I thought the book was probably about a 5-star. About halfway through till the very end, I was thinking that, and then that ending, and I was like, oh, never mind, I'm not sure what to rate it. So yeah, I'm kind of stuck between those 2 ratings, and I'm having trouble sorting through my thoughts, I guess, on it. So I'll probably have to think about it some more. I will probably write a review just because it affected me enough, I think, that I want to do that. I do want to read the rest of the series. I haven't heard anything about the sequels. I've only heard about this one, and I have the second one. I thought it was really, really interesting how Parts of it reminded me of Matched by Ali Kandi, actually. So I don't know if she took off of this book a little bit, but just how the citizens just don't have a clue that they're being controlled. I think it's interesting that, you know, and I think it's true. The Truman Show, I don't know if you guys have ever seen The Truman Show, the movie with Jim Carrey. That is one of my all-time favorite movies. And oh, I'm not making any sense at all. Let me start over. So The Truman Show, if you have not seen it, is a movie about a man named Truman who is in a false world. He's under this huge dome, and it's this seaside, perfect, idealistic town that he lives in. And his entire life is a reality show. He is on camera 24 hours a day, and he is not aware of it. Everything is set up for him. His wife, his friends, his job, his everyday living, and there's cameras everywhere. And he's been recorded since conception, in the womb. Well, I don't know if since conception, but since he was in the womb, they had cameras in there. And his whole life has been on camera, and everybody watches him. It's called The Truman Show, and he has no idea. Well, Ed Harris plays the guy, Christoph, that's his name, who created the show, is in charge of the whole show and everything, and he's like this big father figure, and he thinks himself so wise and everything, and he looks at Truman like his son almost, but, you know, Truman doesn't even know who he is. But one of the newscasters is interviewing Christoph, and they ask him why Truman has never suspected what's going on, because the basic premise of the movie is Truman's in this thing, and he starts to have clues that things aren't real, and so it's about him discovering what's real and what's not. So it's interesting. And so the reporter asked Christoph why Truman has never come close to suspecting anything until now, and Christoph says, you know, we accept the reality with which we've been given, which is very true. And I think that's what makes these books so powerful. You know, you think, how can they think that everything's perfect? And it's because that's all they've known. They don't know another way, so that's just how it is, and they're content with that. And I think that's so true. I think, you know, it's really easy to get in your little bubble and not realize what's going on outside of your own life, and just get caught up in that, and just, it is how it is, and that's it, and you don't ever try to change anything and make it better and really look at things. So in that, I really thought this book was genius, and I think it presented it in a really awesome way, and a really thought-provoking book. So it's a really, really, really good book. I did really enjoy it. Just that ending, I can't quite give it 5 stars. Alright, the 3 novellas or shorts that I read were from the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. I read the second novella. It's a prequel to the Throne of Glass, and it's called The Assassin in the Desert. And I gave this one 5 stars. It was really good. I really love the novellas. And I should have read, there's 4 of them before Throne of Glass, and I should have read all 4 of them before Throne of Glass, because I kind of already know what's going to happen based off of Throne of Glass. But they're still entertaining, and I really did like the one with the desert. I thought it was really good. And then I read 2 shorts that are free to read. They're hard to find, but they are, they're not really novellas. They're not long enough for that, but they're shorts that take place between Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight. One of them was Selena and the Princess, or The Assassin and the Princess. So it's about her and Nehemia. They go shopping, and it's about just more about their relationship and how Nehemia views the world that she's in now. It becomes kind of a political thing, even though they're supposed to be having fun. So it was pretty good. I didn't enjoy it as much as I have the other ones, and I gave it 4 stars. The other one I read was The Assassin and the Captain, and this is, she gets back from one of her jobs, I guess, one of her missions, and she meets Captain Westhall at the entrance, and they have, it's basically a scene where they're talking, and more about, you know, I don't know, they're just learning more about each other and their friendship and all of that. And I really enjoyed this one. I give it 5 stars just because I really like the dynamic between the two, and I thought it was a really good little story. So those were the e-novellas or the novellas or shorts that I read. I finally got to Last Days of Summer by Steve Kluger. This is the book that's going around the country and Canada from a friend of mine on Goodreads, and this was an amazing book. I really loved it. I kind of had a feeling I would when I read the synopsis, but I think I'm just going to read the back of it, the little blurb, just to kind of give you an idea, because I'm not sure if I can describe it very well in my own words. Last Days of Summer is the story of Joey Margulis, neighborhood punching bag, growing up goofy and mostly fatherless in Brooklyn in the early 1940s. A boy looking for a hero, Joey decides to latch on to Charlie Banks, the all-star third baseman for the New York Giants. But Joey's chosen champion doesn't exactly welcome the extreme attention of a persistent young fan with an overactive imagination. Then again, this strange, needy kid might be exactly what Banks needs. So what it is basically the story of Joey and Charlie Banks as they become almost like, I don't know how to describe the relationship. Maybe big brother, little brother almost. I really don't know how to describe it. But the entire book, it's not written like a normal book. It is all letters and telegrams and documentation between the two of them, and also as the story gets going, between other friends and families that are in their lives, and you get to know all the characters based on what they're writing. It also has excerpts from like local newspapers, what's going on with the war in Europe, because that's a huge factor in the book, and yeah, it has like Joey's report cards in it. So it's just all about, so you get to know basically all about Joey and all about Charlie based on all this documentation and their words to each other. And it's divided up by years, 1940, 1941, and 1942. And it is so funny. It is just hilarious because Joey is a smart-mouthed little rascal. I mean, he would take the greatest patience of anyone. He is brilliant kid. He's very smart. And he knows how to play people really well. And it's just funny, some of the stuff he does. He ends up, there's also notes in here, interviews between him and his psychiatrist, because he gets arrested for causing trouble in Brooklyn, and he gets beaten up almost all the time, and his father has left their family and is basically ignoring him and his family, and this is in the 40s, so they still, Joey has to like write a paper on his father and do all this other stuff that he needs a father for, and he doesn't have one. And also he's Jewish, so his bar mitzvah is coming up too. He doesn't have a father figure or anything, and that's kind of why he latches onto Charlie. And Charlie kind of sends him form letters at first and ignores him, and then eventually he gets pissed off at him, and they start writing back and forth about basically calling each other names. It's just so funny. And eventually they kind of become friends, and it takes a while, but they can't, they just kind of latch on to each other, and Charlie is not really a stand-up guy either, and Joey kind of makes him be more that way. So I just really love this book, and the end of it is very moving, and I had tears in my eyes, and it's just a really good book. I really enjoyed it. It's mainly written, it's not really advertised as a YA book, but when I was looking it up and everything, apparently that's the audience that tends to read it, is anyone who likes YA. So if you're a YA reader, and you like historical fiction at all, but even if you really don't, it's not, there's just, the fiction's in there, the historical part's in there, but it's not real heavy. It's a lot more about this kid who needs a hero, and it's just, I just really loved it. I think anyone could relate to it. It was really good. So yeah, 5-star read, and I will be sending it off to the next person on the list once they give me their address. I haven't heard back yet to get the address, but I will be sending this off. I read The Human by Kiri Taylor, the second book in the Eden trilogy, which is a dystopian. Why a dystopian? And I really loved it. It's a great sequel. I don't know if it was better than the first one, The Bane, but it wasn't worse. I mean, I would say it's probably about the same. I gave it 4 stars. It's a really good read. It's very action-packed and quick-moving storyline, so you won't get bored. There's not oodles of detail, but there is interesting things, and there's twists that we learn throughout. We learned a big twist at the end of this one, and this one is a little bit of a cliffhanger-ish thing. The next book comes out in 2014 sometime. It doesn't have a release date yet, and that will be the end of the trilogy. Basically, the whole premise of this trilogy is, it kind of makes me think of The Partials by Dan Wells. It's mankind in the future has developed this technology. It's called Torbane, is the name of the company. That it's a machine-like substance that can repair humans. So, like, if you have damage to a kidney or your heart, it can replace that with this machine, and it regenerates itself and becomes part of your body and your makeup. And it's like a machine type substance. And they go through these trials to get this going. Well, eventually they develop it, and the very first people, it's like this huge miracle thing. And the first people who have it done, it's this great thing. Well, it takes on a mind of its own, basically, and it keeps regenerating over the human body until it takes over the brain, and then the people become like robots, even though they're still human. I mean, they can be killed and all that. They're still human creatures, but they don't need to really take care of themselves or eat or, that kind of thing. So they're kind of part human and part creature. And it's kind of like a plague type disease where once it takes over the brain, it tells the human to spread the technology. And so anyone who becomes in contact with they call them the Bane, becomes infected. And you really just have to be in direct contact with them. It's like an airborne almost virus. And they get the technology, and it takes a few hours, and eventually they're no longer human. I would compare it to zombies, except you're machines, and it's a little bit different as they don't eat people, they spread it. So it's kind of hard to explain. You get it more in the books. But basically, there's almost no humans left in the world. All that's left are these Bane. And they're not organized, and they're not smart in that way. And then they have what they call the sleepers. There's a whole bunch of people that were turned that just don't do anything. They like stand still in their spot, and they'll look at people, but they won't move or attack people. They just stand there, and they call them sleepers. And they're not, I mean, a lot of this is up in the air. The humans that are left have no real idea how all this is working. They're just trying to survive. So the main characters are Eve and Avian, and Avian is the head of their little group of tribe. There's like 30 people in this settlement, and they move around to different locations throughout the year based on weather, and they have gardens, whatever, and they're self-sufficient. And it's been like, I don't know, 6 to 8 years since this whole uprising, and they've got like just a whole montage, assortment of people. Well, Eve doesn't remember her life up until Avian found her. And Gabriel, who is the other leader of their group. Avian's kind of the doctor figure. He was training for medicine. But they find her, and she's 15, and they find her naked in the woods, and she doesn't know anything except her name, and she can't remember anything. So they kind of adopt her, and she's very smart and very strong, and just very, she's a great big help. She's a great fighter. So she's kind of the main character in this, and you learn more and more about her past as the story goes on. But basically, the whole premise of the story is they're trying to survive, and the Bane are slowly becoming organized. And at the beginning of this book, they're slowly starting to change. They're becoming more organized, and they're coming out in the day more. And so things are changing, and no one's sure what's going on. So they're looking, this tribe, they have to leave their settlement because they're attacked, and they're looking for any other human life. So that's the basic premise of this story, and it's really good. I don't want to tell you anymore because I'll give a whole bunch of it away, but it gets really in-depth, and the twists and everything are really well done. It's very action-packed, quick moving, really good if you're into that. Alright, and then I did a reread of the Immortal Rules, which I am going to give 5 stars to again. I love this book just as much the second time. It's really good, really good, really good, really good. Now, a lot of people I've heard did not want to read it because it's another vampire book, and it's not a lot more than a vampire book. It is a vampire book, but it is a dystopian with zombies, and I mean, there's just so much woven into the story. What's great about it is the main character. The basic premise of this one is, of course, it's a dystopian, so that's the future, and vampires have taken over the world. What happened was a disease came out called the red lung virus, and it killed about 90% of the population. And what happened was, somewhere in that, they tried to develop a cure for this red lung virus, and it mutated, and certain people who were infected became these zombies. They call them rabbits, and they're like a zombie, and if you're bitten by one, then you get this disease too, and you become a rabbit. So you got the zombie factor. So vampires, to save humanity, because if the humans go extinct, then the vampires can no longer survive because they have to survive with human blood. They created these vampire cities, and they're like forts, basically, this walled-in city. And they have control of all the human population. They treat them like blood cattle. They're all registered. They come around once a week, and they draw blood from them for the vampires in the city. And it's required. And in exchange, the humans get food and shelter and all that. So there's basically no point to humanity anymore other than giving blood to vampires. And if they don't give, the registers don't give blood to vampires, they will come and take what's due to them, even if it kills the human, if they have to take that much. So, vampires in this one are cruel and horrible, horrible people. And they still hunt at night, even though, most of the registered have doors and everything. They lock themselves in, so they're safe. Then you have the fringe of these cities, where you have the people who do not want to be registered, and for whatever reason they do not want to be blood cattle, and they have a mind of their own, and they live on the fringes, but they're not given anything because they're not giving blood. So they have to steal, and it's a daily battle to survive, and they have like little gangs and everything. So the main character of this is Allison Sacramento. Allie, she's called, and she lives on the fringe. And she's a very smart Asian girl who hates vampires. Her mother was killed by one, and her mother was very smart and taught her how to read. Most humans do not know, and in fact I would say almost all humans do not know how to read. They're not educated at all. They're kept like slaves, basically. So they have no idea. Even Allie doesn't know very much about the world ahead of what happened, our civilization, I guess. But her mother taught her how to read, and she does have some books, so she is a little bit smarter than your average human, and very spitfire kind of girl. She is attacked by rabbits in the beginning of the story, and she is dying, and a vampire who she met previously, who kind of just let her go, who's a very different, mysterious guy, happens upon her, and he gives her a choice. He says he will either kill her quickly so she doesn't suffer and doesn't become a rabbit, or he will turn her into a vampire and she can fulfill her days as a vampire. But he gives her the choice, and in face of her own mortality, she decides to become a vampire. She kind of makes this snap-minute decision, and he turns her into a vampire. So she becomes the thing that she hates the most in this world. She becomes a vampire. So this is all her story, how she becomes a vampire and how she survives at the same time trying to save humanity while being a vampire. So it's really, really interesting. It's really good. And she is a monster, and she's come with terms with that because, yeah, vampires in this book are not good, and they do need human blood. They can't survive off of animal blood like in Twilight. So, but anyway, it's a really good story, and I really enjoyed it. And you learn more and more about the past and how it all came to be, and the virus. There is a short story in an anthology, Till the World Ends. There's 3 short stories of dystopians in that one, and one of those is a Julie Kagawa story, prequel of the days when the red lung virus was rampant. So it tells you about how this all came to pass. So you get to learn that. So that's a really good short story too if you're interested in this series. And the last book I read this week was Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas, and this is probably my favorite of the week. 5-star read. I really, really loved it. I told you that I just really love good fantasies, and this is a good fantasy. This was, I think, twice as good as Throne of Glass, and I love Throne of Glass. But yeah, this was even better. There was so much going on. It was craziness. You had no idea what was going to happen. I did guess one twist, but it was small potatoes compared to all the big revelations at the end. And so much happens, and the gloves are off, and yeah, you just don't have any clue what's going to happen. We learn a lot more about the world. We learn more about Selena. We learn more about Dorian. We learn about everyone and this world, and the stakes are truly raised by the end, and I cannot wait for the sequel. I think there's supposed to be 5 or 6 books in this series, and this is only the 2nd, so there's still a lot of story left, and I'm really excited for the next one. That is my weekly wrap-up. Another good week in books for me. I hope everyone else has a good week, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.